number of operationally deployed strategic nuclear warheads, which we're going to do over a 10-year period by more than 2/3. I think that's a very significant step and a very significant change in the geostrategic deployment of nuclear assets.
Lane Selfer, Political Science. You had mentioned that the Iraq War made a big impression on the government of Libya regarding abandoning its nuclear weapons program. Has it made any impression whatsoever on Iran, North Korea, or don't they think that's a relevant example for them?
I think that in many respects the Iranians and the North Koreans think that they're in a different situation from Iraq, and they are. And that's one reason why we're using different techniques to deal with the nuclear weapons programs in North Korea and Iran, as I've described before. I won't go into them again. Each situation is different. The way of handling it is different because the countries involved are in different circumstances in terms of the development of their program and the geopolitical environment in which they sit. But the objective for us is the same in all three cases, is we will not accept these countries with nuclear weapons, and that's the bottom line. In the back.
That's all sophomore political science student. You said that the justification for invading Iraq was the threat of Saddam Hussein's regime, not the weapons of mass destruction. But I can't see how anybody can deny that leading up to the invasion, we tried to make a strong case that Saddam had weapons of mass destruction. Since we invaded over a year ago, we haven't found one single weapon. So what exactly was Saddam's threat?
Well, really, I answered that question about 3 times a few moments ago. The argument is that the threat was Saddam Hussein. The threat was the regime because of its demonstrated use of weapons of mass destruction in the past, its keeping together the intellectual capacity to recreate its WMD programs, and the threat that a proven aggressor like Saddam had was something that couldn't be contained and couldn't be allowed to stay in power. You know, one can ask the question, how many countries does a dictator have to invade before you come to the conclusion this is a dictator who invades other countries? And how many times are you willing to allow that to happen? How many times are you willing to have to go to war again to throw him out of Kuwait before you conclude the right thing to do is eliminate the regime, eliminate the threat, and give the country back to its people? Yeah.
Chris Miller, Political Science. You, many people believe that the United States acted against the United Nations demands in invading Iraq. Would you describe that as accurate?
It's absolutely not accurate. There are at least 2 distinct reasons that we had authority from the Security Council. The first, most contemporary, is that in the adoption of Security Council Resolution 1441, the resolution says expressly that if Saddam Hussein doesn't come into compliance with previous Security Council resolutions, serious consequences would follow. And we said at the time, serious consequences means the use of force. Does anybody doubt what we meant by serious consequences? Is anybody in this room doubt that anybody on the Security Council didn't know what we meant by serious consequences? Everybody knew what we meant. Everybody knew it.
So what about the other things we asked?
And what did they do? They voted in favor of 1441, didn't they?
What about the argument that we needed international support, not as a pretext for invasion, but as a means of coercing compliance?
That is a political argument. The question that was raised here is what authority we had. And the point I'm making is we said to everybody when 1441 was on the table in the Security Council, if you vote in this and Saddam Hussein does not come into compliance, serious consequences will follow. And they went ahead and passed it, voted for it. Everybody understood what it meant. So don't complain to me later that we didn't have authority. That's the first basis. But the second basis is we didn't need 1441 to begin with. Resolution 687, which was the ceasefire resolution after the first Persian Gulf War, said that in order to obtain a ceasefire, the government of Iraq had to do a number of things, one of which was fully account for all of its weapons of mass destruction and give up the capability to have weapons of mass destruction in the future. The terms of that ceasefire resolution were repeatedly violated by the Iraqis over a 12-year period. Now, when you have a ceasefire embodied in a Security Council resolution or not, and one party to the ceasefire repeatedly violates significant terms of the ceasefire, by definition, the ceasefire is void. And the use of force, originally authorized by Resolution 678, becomes permissible again. So we had all the authority we needed.
I'm Daniel Stevenson, I'm a senior here at Elizabethtown, Computer Science and Professional Writing major. I was wondering, what authority does the U.S. have to unilaterally or virtually unilaterally enforce what the UN says, especially given that our dues haven't been paid since prior to almost any of these resolutions, and we haven't obeyed any resolutions ourselves to do that.
Well, I mean, there are several things wrong in your question. The first is that if you go back to a variety of resolutions that have been passed in terms of how they're enforced, there isn't any doubt that everybody who adopted the resolutions knew exactly how they were going to be enforced. And I can tell you from my own personal experience in getting the authorization to use force in the first Persian Gulf War, 678, one of the things we looked at was the authorization to use force in the Korean War, because that was the only time in the entire history of the United Nations that it had authorized force. And the resolution in the case of Korea said that countries should come to the aid of the Republic of Korea, South Korea, and assist forces fighting under the command of the United States. That's what the resolution said in the case of South Korea in 1950. So we thought originally in the case of the first Persian Gulf War, we would say, well, why not write a resolution that says exactly the same thing? And a lot of countries said, oh, look, you can't put we're going to fight under the command of the United States. Saudi Arabia said that. A number of other countries said that. And we said, well, whose command are you going to fight under? And they said, the United States. We said, you know, being straightforward Americans, we said, well, why don't you write that in the resolution? Oh, no, can't do that. That would be bad. That would undercut our political legitimacy. So just write, come to the aid of forces assisting Kuwait's exercise of its legitimate right for self-defense. Everybody will know what that means. It will mean fighting under the command of the United States. So we put that in the resolution. If you look for the words under the command of the United States, it won't be in Resolution 678. But there is nobody who didn't understand exactly what that meant. And when it came to the text of 1441 and the phrase serious consequences, everybody understood what that meant too. This is, you know, the nature of diplomacy, the way you write these things. You can talk about it any way you want. But let's not suffer under the illusion that people didn't know exactly what they were getting into. If the countries on the Security Council don't like the way we pay our assessments, that's up to them. That's fine. They can vote against these resolutions. They don't do it. But they can't, having taken that position, I don't think they've got any equity to complain later about the consequences of their own action. I think that kind of criticism is just immature.
Can I respond?